Paradoxes are interesting problems that seem to defy logic and challenge our understanding of the world. They often present situations where things don't add up in the way we expect, leading to surprising or confusing ideas. Paradoxes have been studied by philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists for centuries because they make us think deeply about logic, truth, and how we see reality. In this guide, we'll look at some of the most famous paradoxes, explaining them in a way that's easier to understand while still exploring the big ideas they represent. 1. The liar paradox, a statement that can't be true or false. The liar paradox is a classic example of a logical problem that doesn't seem to have a clear solution. It comes from the sentence, "This statement is false." If the sentence is telling the truth, then it must be false because that's what it says. But if it's false, then it must be true because it's correctly stating that it is false. This creates a loop where the sentence can't consistently be either true or false. This paradox shows us that not all statements can be easily classified as true or false, which challenges our understanding of truth itself. 2. The Barber Paradox, a puzzle about self-reference. The Barber Paradox was created by the mathematician Bertrand Russell to show the problems that happen when something refers to itself. The paradox is about a barber who shaves all the men in town who do not shave themselves. The question is, does the barber shave himself? If the barber shaves himself, then he shouldn't, according to the rule that he only shaves those who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he should shave himself because he shaves those who don't shave themselves. This creates a contradiction, making it impossible to decide whether the barber shaves himself or not. 3. Zeno's paradoxes, the strange world of motion and time. Zeno's paradoxes are a group of problems that make us think hard about movement and time. One famous example is the Achilles and the tortoise paradox. In this story, the hero Achilles gives a tortoise a head start in a race. Zeno argues that Achilles can never catch up because every time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a little further ahead. Even though this gap gets smaller and smaller, it never completely disappears, leading to that Achilles will never overtake the tortoise. These paradoxes make us reconsider how we think about space, time, and motion, especially when it comes to dividing things into smaller and smaller parts. 4. The unexpected hanging paradox, when predictions go wrong. The unexpected. Hanging paradox is about a prisoner who is told he will be hanged at noon one day in the coming week, but the execution will be a surprise. The prisoner tries to figure out the day by reasoning that it can't be Friday, because if he hasn't been hanged by Thursday, he'll know it's happening on Friday, ruining the surprise. He continues this reasoning for each day until he concludes that the hanging can't happen at all. However, when he's hanged on a day he didn't expect, it still ends up being a surprise. This paradox shows how our predictions and expectations can sometimes lead us in the wrong direction, even when our reasoning seems solid. 5. The Ship of Theseus. What makes something the same? The Ship of Theseus is a thought experiment that asks whether an object that has had all its parts replaced remains the same object. Imagine Theseus's ship, which has its parts replaced one by one as they wear out. After all the parts have been replaced, is it still the same ship? And if the old parts are used to build another ship, which one is the original Ship of Theseus? This paradox raises questions about identity and how we determine whether something remains the same when its parts or components change over time. 6. The Sorites Paradox, when small changes add up.
The Sorites Paradox is also known as the paradox of the heap. It asks, if you have a heap of sand and remove one grain at a time, at what point does it stop being a heap? If removing one grain doesn't make it not a heap, but repeating this process eventually leaves no heap at all, where do we draw the line? This paradox highlights the difficulties in dealing with vague concepts and how small changes can add up to a big change, even if no single step seems to make a difference. 7. The Twin Paradox. Time moves differently. The twin paradox is a concept from the theory of relativity in physics. It involves a pair of twins, one of whom travels on a high-speed journey through space, while the other stays on Earth.
Because of the effects of traveling close to the speed of light, the traveling twin ages more slowly than the one who stayed on Earth. When the traveling twin returns, they find that they are younger than their sibling. While this isn't a paradox in the strictest sense, it challenges our usual understanding of time and shows that time can pass differently depending on how fast you're moving. 8. The Bootstrap Paradox. Cause and effect in time travel. The Bootstrap Paradox is a time travel problem where something exists without an origin. For example, imagine a time traveler who goes back in time and gives Shakespeare a copy of his plays. Shakespeare then publishes them, and over time they reach the time traveler, who then takes them back to Shakespeare. The plays seem to exist in a loop without ever being written originally. This paradox challenges our ideas about cause and effect and raises questions about how time travel might work. 9. The Paradox of Tolerance. How much intolerance can we tolerate? The paradox of tolerance says that in order to maintain a tolerant society, we must be intolerant of intolerance. This seems contradictory because tolerance usually means accepting differences. However, if a society allows intolerant views to grow unchecked, those views can end up destroying the very tolerance that allowed them to exist. This paradox is important in discussions about free speech and how to balance the protection of freedoms with the need to prevent harm. 10. The Paradox of the Ravens. How do we confirm a rule? The paradox of the ravens is about how we confirm general statements like, all ravens are black. Seeing a black raven seems to confirm this statement. However, by the same logic, seeing a green apple should also confirm it because it's an example of something that is not a raven and not black. This seems strange because we don't usually think of a green apple as providing evidence about ravens. This paradox makes us think about how we gather evidence and what counts as confirmation of a rule or statement. 11. The Grandfather Paradox. Time travel and changing the past. The Grandfather Paradox is another time travel paradox. It asks what would happen if you traveled back in time and killed your grandfather before your parent was born. If you succeed, you wouldn't be born, but then you couldn't go back in time to kill your grandfather. This creates a contradiction because your actions would prevent you from existing in the first place. This paradox highlights the difficulties with time travel and how it could lead to impossible situations if changing the past is allowed. 12. Russell's Paradox. The problem with sets. Russell's paradox is a problem in set theory, a branch of mathematics. It asks us to think about a set of all sets that do not include themselves as members. If such a set exists, does it include itself? If it does, then by definition it shouldn't. If it doesn't, then it should include itself. This creates a contradiction. Russell's paradox shows the problems that arise when we try to define certain concepts too broadly, leading to contradictions in logic and mathematics. 13. The Monty Hall Paradox. A surprising probability puzzle. The Monty Hall Paradox is based on a game show scenario. You're given 3 doors to choose from, with a car behind one and goats behind the others. After you pick a door, the host, who knows what's behind each door, opens one of the other 2 doors to reveal a goat. You're then given the choice to stick with your original pick or switch to the other unopened door. Surprisingly, switching doors gives you a better chance of winning the car. This paradox challenges our intuitive understanding of probability and shows how our first instincts can sometimes be wrong. 14. The Infinite Hotel. Paradox. The strange nature of infinity. The Infinite Hotel Paradox, also known as Hilbert's Hotel, is a thought experiment that shows how strange infinity can be. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, all occupied. If a new guest arrives, it seems like there's no room available, but because the hotel is infinite, the manager can move each guest to the next room, guest in room 1 to room 2, guest in room 2 to room 3, and so on, freeing up room 1 for the new guest. This process can continue indefinitely. This paradox helps us understand the concept of infinity and how it behaves differently from finite numbers. 15. The Bootstrap Paradox. Objects without origins. The Bootstrap Paradox is another time travel paradox, where an object or piece of information exists without a clear origin. For example, if a time traveler goes back in time and gives someone an invention blueprint, which then gets passed down until it reaches the time traveler who takes it back in time again, the blueprint seems to exist in a loop without anyone originally creating it. The object or information has no clear starting point, which defies our normal understanding of cause and effect. This paradox makes us question how time and causality work, especially if time travel were possible. It suggests that in some situations, an effect might not have a clear cause, which is deeply puzzling. 16. The paradox of the arrow, the illusion of motion. The paradox of the arrow is one of Zeno's paradoxes and deals with the concept of motion. Zeno argues that if we think of time as a series of individual moments, then at any given moment, an arrow in flight is not moving. It is just in one position at that moment. If every moment is like this, then how can the arrow be moving at all? The paradox suggests that what we think of as motion might actually be an illusion when we break it down into individual instants. This paradox challenges our understanding of how we perceive movement and time. It forces us to think about whether motion is something continuous or just a series of still moments that our mind connects together. 17. The paradox of the unexpected exam. A surprise that can't be expected. The paradox of the unexpected exam, also known as the paradox of the unexpected hanging, involves a scenario where a teacher tells students that they will have a surprise exam next week. The students try to figure out when it will happen and reason that if it doesn't happen by a certain day, it will no longer be a surprise, leading them to conclude that the exam can't happen at all. However, when the exam does take place unexpectedly, it still manages to be a surprise. This paradox highlights the limitations of reasoning when it comes to predicting events that are meant to be unpredictable. It shows how trying to outthink a situation can sometimes lead to that contradict the reality. 18. The paradox of fiction. Why we feel real emotions for imaginary things. The paradox of fiction asks why we experience real emotions for characters and events we know are fictional. If we know that a story is not real, why do we still feel sad when a character dies, or happy when things go well for them? The paradox arises because it seems illogical to have real emotions for things we know don't exist. This paradox makes us think about the nature of emotions and imagination. It suggests that our minds are capable of deeply engaging with fiction in a way that blurs the line between reality and imagination, allowing us to feel genuine emotions for fictional events. 19. The paradox of analysis, the challenge of clear definitions. The paradox of analysis deals with the problem of defining concepts in a way that is both clear and informative. If we try to define a concept precisely, we might not add any new information, making the definition unhelpful. But if we make the definition more informative, we might end up changing the meaning of the concept. This creates a paradox where it's hard to define something in a way that is both clear and useful. This paradox challenges our ability to explain ideas clearly without losing their original meaning. It highlights the difficulties in communication and understanding, especially when dealing with complex or abstract concepts. Paradoxes are more than just tricky puzzles. They are powerful tools that force us to rethink how we understand the world. From the simple yet perplexing liar paradox to the deep implications of the grandfather paradox, these logical challenges push the boundaries of our knowledge and reasoning. By exploring these paradoxes, we gain a better understanding of the complexities of logic, time, identity, and reality. They remind us that the world is full of surprises and that our assumptions about how things work might not always hold true. Whether in philosophy, mathematics, or everyday life, paradoxes continue to inspire curiosity and wonder, making us question the things we take for granted and pushing us to explore new ways of thinking.